Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. Well, now here we are at the end of January, and it's important to take a look back at what we've seen. So this is temperature anomalies for North America over the past 30 days. And we've seen that much of the coldest air in North America has been tucked away here in parts of Alaska and over Greenland. And while we have seen a few cold air intrusions that have snuck in through the Canadian prairies in the north-central United States, much of the eastern half of the country has spent the last month with very limited colder air coming into place. And honestly, even though we can see some cooler pockets in the west, we've really resisted bringing in sustained cold air there as well. So the question becomes, as we move now into the month of February, does this pattern change? And that's one of the things we're going to be addressing in this video to kind of piggyback on the long-range outlook we provided yesterday. So let's get right into some temperature forecasting here. Over the next 5 days, we don't see much of a change. Certainly with the coldest air tucked away into Alaska and the Pacific jet stream so very, very strong. Overall, our pattern lacks major high amplitude trough ridge systems, and as a result, we tend to stay on the milder side here across the lower 48 and the Canadian prairies. We do have some change coming in early next week. We're going to get a cool off that's going to happen from west to east, but out ahead of it, some really, really warm conditions. We do notice that by days 5 through 10, there are some changes that are of importance. We're going to discuss this. Models have been showing over the last 3 to 4 days the potential for some ridging to come in to the Gulf of Alaska and Alaska. And what that could eventually do here is set us up with a pattern in the jet stream that's doing something a bit more like this, with a southeastern ridge here, but a trough that settles into the western United States. What that's going to possibly do is really pack up the snow in the Intermountain West, but it could dry things out along the west coast. And honestly, in California, that's not what we want to be hearing. But this pattern would keep the eastern half of North America still on this wanting for having a winter here. So with that, I want to talk now about soil moisture. This map I've been showing repeatedly this winter because it's going to be critical for our spring flooding issues. Now remember, even if spring just comes in normal, we have to deal with the fact that tucked away in the soil right now is a pretty sizable excess of water in the headwaters of the Mississippi and the Missouri River, getting all the way into the Ohio River, and then down here to where it all dumps into the Gulf of Mexico. So some locations in there seeing 4 to 6 inches of excess water in the soil. Meanwhile, out west, things are dry in a few pockets, so we can see here, and here some drier conditions in our soils. And that'll be critical as well as we progress through the month of February to see if we get much change there. Now, right now, adding to the soil moisture stresses we do have in the central United States, if we were to melt off the snow that's currently in the ground, we're going to be adding quite a bit more into this corridor. Also, right down here into Texas and Oklahoma, really into Kansas, where the most recent storm system put down in some locations 15 inches of snow. But I want you to notice this. Even though I do have some light snow forecast to move through this area over the next 48 hours or so, we're snow free in parts of Montana, eastern Wyoming, getting into all the way over to western parts of the Dakotas and down into Nebraska. And so that's a very important region that right now just doesn't have much snow on the ground. Got some coming, but not much. Just to show you how much snow did fall over the last 72 hours, that little system really outperformed what we anticipated. While the models really bullseyed the location and did get this right, coming across parts of Missouri into southern Illinois, the amounts here, we knew that we had the probability of at least getting 4 to 6 inches, but we had a couple of pockets in there where it just kept coming down, some heavy banding, 15 inches of snow in that area. So impressive to say the least. Now, just to check in real quick on the basin average snow water content out west, remember what we've seen recently is the flow pattern has given us a large surface high pressure system that's set up right here. And all around its periphery, especially in the northwestern part of the United States, we have made major advances here and in the northern Rockies on our snow water content. So things are looking very good in Oregon, Washington, Idaho. They're also looking very good in the central Rockies and southern as well. But I'm very worried, and I talked about this yesterday, about what's going on in California with that protective ridge in place. And as you see the forecast coming up here in a few minutes, you'll notice that this is a pattern we're not breaking down anytime soon. So we need to really bring up precipitation in California in order to help them go into the upcoming dry season without major stresses on their water resources. Right now, we've seen the Sierra Nevada really shrink back in its snow content. So get into our rapid update here. Right now, some of the things we're watching, we have a couple of regions across the country where we're dealing with some fog. I want to specifically talk about this area because with all the snow that was just put down in parts of Kansas and Oklahoma, as we move through this weekend, temperatures moderate. We're going to be melting a lot of that snow during the day, and then as temperatures drop off overnight, easily saturating the lower atmosphere. So major fog possibilities inside that area. Now, as we look elsewhere, come right up here into parts of Montana. That color represents a wind warning. And look at this. This just blows my mind. Throughout the end of this week, look inside that box. They're going to easily see wind gusts of 50 to 70 miles an hour. And at times, just your occasional gust up to 90. I'm talking about Cut Bank to Great Falls, moving over to Hayes. This area in parts of Montana really cranking up the winds, and I'm going to show you why in just a few seconds. You see here, this is how the jet stream sets itself up through the weekend. And this large ridge that we see in the flow here in the lower 48 is going to be bringing in some very warm conditions. But underneath that flow coming off the mountains there, really cranking up those winds in the low levels of the atmosphere too over Montana. Well, with that warm up in temperatures I've been telling you about, take a look at this. This is every day through the next 7 days, looking at departure from normal for our highs. Certainly starting off today, we've got the cooler weather in Texas through Missouri. This is behind the system that just went through. But as I play things forward, you're going to see this cooler weather slide southeast, and look at the warmth that will replace it from the west. So here's Thursday's departure from normal. Friday, look at Saturday. The central plains cranking up here in temperatures. Those winds rolling off the mountains, downslope flow, compressional warming, really warm conditions. So the light snow that moves in before this gets replaced by some very warm conditions. Now moving from there, this is Sunday's departure from normal. Central Plains very warm, melting all that snow we just had, and this extends all the way east with only Florida hanging under the cooler bias. Monday, well, this is the time we're watching our next system emerge out of the south central plains, moving toward the Great Lakes. So out ahead of it, a lot of warmth. But then behind it, with the trough digging in out west, we start to cool things back off again. So, as I get you out here to next Tuesday and now into Wednesday, we do go on, as we often say, a bit of a roller coaster ride in terms of our temperatures. So let's take a look at what it's going to look like here in our high-res modeling. Starting off here, let's get to early this morning. So this is early this morning. We're watching light rain move out of the Carolinas and offshore. Meanwhile, as we said, some light snow, possibly mixed with some freezing rain, comes out of eastern parts of Montana. This is before the big warm-up over the weekend. You're going to see that light snow spreading into the western Dakotas, central Dakotas, and eventually into parts of Nebraska. Meanwhile, while this is happening, down here we have a little shortwave trough that sneaks out of Mexico into Texas. And as the light snow spreads into, you see it here, into parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin, maybe over into parts of Michigan and Indiana, the rain will really start to set up by Friday morning here, moving through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. So maybe some light snow sneaking through parts of Indiana and Ohio here. Watch out for that. Kind of this, like the spitting stuff we've seen as of late. But as the main wave you just saw earlier sneaks into parts of Iowa here, we could get some light snow as well. This is noon on Friday. Well, the rain over the southeast then pushes throughout Friday afternoon and evening over into the Carolinas, and we'll take a look at those amounts in a few moments, but could get some snow above about 3,500 feet in the Appalachian Mountains here as lighter snow on the backside moves through Wisconsin, Illinois, and Missouri. Now, that is the first round of things. We then calm down for the rest of the weekend, and we're waiting on this. You see, early next week, we're going to be seeing a sizable trough move in. But it's got kind of two pieces to it, and that's important to look at. The tilt on this trough is positive. And the problem, I say problem with this trough, is that we don't have really, really strong winds rounding the base of it or exiting into the next ridge. So what this means is this elongated, positively tilted trough is not going to be providing the best upper level support to pull into the midsection of the United States a really deep low pressure system. It'd have to go over to negative tilt. It'd have to go over into a couple jet streak situation, and it just isn't doing it. So what do we end up getting? Well, we've seen this so far. So this is now Saturday morning. This is now at Saturday afternoon and evening, getting into Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon and evening. At this time, high pressure cell sitting over Florida is going to slide east. That's going to allow the return of moisture as the trough is now digging into the Intermountain West. Snow is piling up in the Intermountain West here through early Tuesday morning, And by Tuesday midday, you see the high is now sitting here over Bermuda, pumping in the moisture to the south of it. So we're going to get wet again down here in the southeast through the Ohio River Valley. But notice there's no well-defined low pressure system in here because the broader trough pulling out here into the northeast just doesn't have the real tight turn to it that we would need to really give us good upper level support for a low. So yes, some snow that'll stretch from Colorado through parts of Kansas, Nebraska, into Iowa, northern Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan. On the south and east side of that, it's going to be rain. We could get a bit of a transition as we get into Tuesday afternoon and evening. Getting into Wednesday morning here, maybe right here in northern Indiana, southern Michigan, and parts of Illinois could see some ice in this area with some overrunning. But overall, this is going to be wet for the Ohio River Valley, just a little bit of snow on the back side of it. That system moves by Wednesday afternoon and evening out to the northeast. And then at this time, we're going to be watching potential for a coastal low to develop down here next Thursday, moving through the southeast, potentially producing some very wet conditions. Now, you're going to want me to continue to pull this forward if you're watching this in the northeast, because the models are once again saying, hey, it could be a big system pulling out of the mid-Atlantic heading toward the northeast. But I'm going to be honest with you, this is pretty far out in the forecast, and what's coming through here to make this happen doesn't right now have really strong ensemble support. So we got to just take it for what it is, an operational model run. I'm going to tell you, watch out. We'll keep a close eye on it. We'll give you an update tomorrow and Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of next week to see if this really manifests itself up the East Coast. So from there, though, let's just take a look at the snowfall first. This is the operational European model run. So with that low that is emerging next week, remember Tuesday into Wednesday, we were painting this quarter for having the snow. Right now, we don't see the major amounts coming out of it, but the potential exists for getting a band of snow in there. As the systems still divert around that high pressure cell over California, the Northwest gets plenty of snow in the Cascade Mountains, a lot of snow coming in here into the Rockies as well. And as the deeper trough dives in, we do need to be aware that maybe some snow here in parts of western Texas as well. So looking at the probability of getting at least 3 inches of snow by next Thursday morning, again, here's that corridor we've been talking about. And yeah, the mountains out here really packing it up. But notice the Sierra Nevada not getting any of this due to that protective high pressure cell. So total accumulated precip, this is again through next Thursday from the operational European model. The southeast has 2 systems coming through and a third waiting in the wings next Friday into Saturday. So I've been very impressed with the long-range model outlook for the wetter than average conditions down here in the southeast and into the mid-south and parts of the Ohio River Valley, Tennessee and Kentucky particularly. Very wet conditions, got a good chance over the next 7-8 days of grabbing another inch to 2 inches of rainfall. This is the snow we were talking about right back in through here. And of course, in the Intermountain West, you can see how wet things are going to be in the Northwest, okay? California, same story. So out into week 2, this is where the pattern really begins to change. Ridging builds in here. The expanse of that ridge keeps much of the western United States dry, and a deep trough starts to come in like this. It then meets up with the subtropical branch here, keeping this area wet into week 2, and we're talking about really piling up the snow in the Intermountain West. So that's what week 2 looks like in terms of your precipitation anomalies. Good multi-model support in this as well. So what's going on here? Well, we continue to see, looking all the way out to the 8th of February, the same pattern we've been discussing for a while. The jet stream starting here in Africa, running across Asia, and then splitting just off the west coast. The subtropical branch then takes over and runs clear into northern Europe. And that split right in through here is the most critical piece to all of this. Taking a look at what that means in terms of the upper level flow, so troughs and ridges, we've been watching over the last 3 or 4 days for the models which have been hinting at the development of this ridge coming into Alaska. That's what's going to allow the trough to settle into the Intermountain West, but with a sizable protective ridge here over the southeast, the question remains, will the eastern half of North America warm up or cool off or stay warm? And I'll tell you, the secret is in watching the difference between Alaska and Greenland. While Alaska seems to be transitioning over to a ridge, no help in the North Atlantic. And therefore, looking out days 10 through 15, with the ridge building in here and the trough establishing like that, This is where we see the hanging on of warmer temperatures, much cooler settling in here out west, but you can just divide the country in half and you will certainly see the eastern half really resisting giving up this warmer pattern that we've been seeing. We need to keep an eye on this. I've seen it over the last 4 or 5 days in the model runs, but the question is, how deep does that cold really get in the western part of the United States? So here it is put together. East Pacific. When Alaska's in a trough, EPO is very high. You notice that the EPO is going back down toward neutral territory, telling me that maybe some ridge is building into the Gulf of Alaska. But no help from the North Atlantic Oscillation. If we could get some blocking setting up for Greenland, we'd see the NAO go from positive territory way down here like this. So with the NAO actually staying in positive territory, that is telling me that the eastern half of North America's probability of getting sustained cold remains relatively low over the next 10 to 15 days. The tropics aren't aiding in this either. Phase 4, 5, and 6 are the warm phases for the eastern half of North America. Phases 7, 8, 1, and 2 are the colder. What's the MJO doing? Well, it's currently sitting here just outside of null phase, and it's forecasted to swing right back around and stay here in phases 4 and 5. Not doing this. So without the tropics helping things along and the North Atlantic keeping its lock in on this positive NAO pattern, it's going to be hard to bring in really cold, sustained air to the eastern half of the country. Yeah, we get cold shots of air, but just not sustained cold. So is the polar stratospheric vortex helping out? Well, right now it's very strong sitting over parts of Russia here. We did talk about in this week's videos how it was going to elongate in the next 7 to 10 days due to a ridge building here in the stratosphere, both coming into Alaska and into Scandinavia. But what you notice is by the time we get out to day 10, the polar stratospheric vortex tends to set up here over parts of northern Europe and northern Russia. And that's just on the other side of the planet for North America here. And its strength is still quite strong, and we're kind of running out of time for a significant polar vortex disruption to give us sustained cold. We'd have to really see this thing drop quickly. And right now, well, the models aren't advertising that. This is just another kind of reason behind why I say if you're in the eastern half of North America, getting sustained shots of colder air anytime soon seem to be relatively low, the probability of that happening. So from there, we'll just transition to South America. Over the next week, the models have been showing this, drier than average conditions in Mato Grosso, Goiás, Tocantins, Minas Gerais. That will be advantageous for Brazilian farmers trying to harvest first crop soybeans. They need to make up some time. They're currently about 5% behind where they were a year ago. Wetter than average conditions down here in Paraná, moving over to Paraguay, and this area needs the rain this time of year to finish out the crop. And there are some desperately needed rains moving right here through parts of Cordoba forecast over this week. But into week 2, if conditions do turn back over wet inside this area, that will slow down the harvest of first crop soybeans. And this begins to become kind of critical as we are needing to get the safrinha crop in, the corn and cotton in, because the later it goes in, the worse or the lower its probability of being successful. And I'm going to finish up just with a continuation of that discussion about Europe. So what we notice here is that with the strong subtropical jet stream starting in Texas and racing clear to Norway, we're going to continue to see much of the Russian wheat belt. So here's the Black Sea. There's Ukraine, Russian wheat belt in through here. We're going to continue to see much above average temperatures. We have to watch out at some point in February if, that's a big if the pattern breaks down for this particular region to possibly go over to a major freeze event. And if the snow doesn't come in before that, we could be talking about a winter wheat kill in this area. So we'll keep an eye on it, see if something like that does happen, report back to you every day. Have a great end to your week. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.